Hi everyone, I want to show off my monk and my gear that I use for GR150 solo pushing right now. I've already cleared a GR145 to this a few days ago. I've also done some other stuff like inners, etc. But I'm focusing on Wave of Light for the 150 push. I'm 3.3k Paragon. I have played this season for roughly 200 hours now, a bit more with the solo push. So I have pretty good gear because I'm only playing monk. So let's go. So first of all, it's important to say that I'm playing the fire version of the build. I get a lot of questions about is lightning not better than this? And the answer is yeah, not really. So they are almost around even. The thing about lightning is you can make it work very easily when you have a Jade tail end, because that one has Spirit on crit as your affix. So when you get a weapon like this and you have the right weapon power on it, like a Kiroshiro's Blade or an Incense Torch or a Rapid Strike, then you can use it and you can play lightning. You can theoretically also play lightning with very heavy investment in resource cost reduction and cooldown, but this is not really recommended. So usually go for this weapon. I play the fire version because I can use the Bartok's Cutthroat, which overall has roughly a similar damage, but it also has this 10% damage stacking effect, which will be very helpful on the boss. So my boss kill will probably be around 2.5 to 3 minutes on a decent single target boss, and with the lightning version it will probably be somewhere like 4.5 minutes or so from what I've heard. So while the lightning rune on Wave of Light is actually stronger in terms of DPS, it is slower on the boss because you lose the Bartok's effect while having this J tail end. Another thing is that I have a huge AoE radius with my Wave of Light, and the Rapid Strike clone is not really reliable when you have big pulls. It teleports around and attacks random targets next to you, and this little AoE from the Pillar of the Ancient Rune does not really help you because all the damage comes from the clone, and I want to make sure that I hit most, if not all, of the pull, because I'm essentially filling up the entire screen with 100 enemies. So I'm positive you're gonna see both options on the leaderboard, especially towards the higher Paragon levels. I would expect more lightning clears because it does have more damage overall, more DPS, but it doesn't work so well on the big pulls. And when you go for time attack mode, like 10 minutes or less, 150 clears at some point when people are gonna speedrun this essentially with 6k Paragon, the lightning will probably win because the boss kill is not so long anymore and you don't rely on these super huge pulls, so you spend less time on making those pulls. And the last reason why I chose fire is also that I have a plan B when I'm pushing, which is the Illusionist Enslaved Nightmare Yellow Terror Demon Elite. So this is something that is kind of like a backup plan. So when I sometimes open a decent map but it's not really quite right, or it has the wrong monster type or something, I hunt for this elite pack and I try to find it, because this one can essentially spawn the boss for you by just summoning more and more monsters from those illusions that spawn real monsters. So there are a few monster types like this in the game. There's also the Tomb Guardian Illusionist that can come with an Unburied, for example. This is like a very notable one. But they are extremely rare and very hard to find, and it will take hundreds of thousands of keys to get such a pack. So this is nothing I would recommend for anyone who wants to spend less than 50 hours at least on a push, but it is an option, and I do have very good chances, if I find it, to beat the 150 with that instead. So anyway, long intro about the fire versus lightning. Let's go with my gear. So I crafted mostly Squirrel's necklaces. So you might have seen a video, I've already uploaded it. The crafting session yielded mostly this amulet, which is pretty decent. Of course I would have liked fire, but air damage and primal 100 and 110% is pretty good, so can't really argue this. The braces are very nice. This is basically best in slot here. So I have the 20 fire after 6 crit, and I have all res, which is much better than something like vitality, and I actually rolled off the dexterity here, so this is absolute juice. Then we have primal conventional elements. You might have seen that one too. So I gambled this one very luckily after like a long bounty session when I just was fed up with the helms, when I got 6 times blind faith primal, and I went for the rings and got this basically first try. That was insane, and yeah, basically it doesn't improve. The stone gauntlets here, they are really nice. I found them at some point along the way. I need the cooldown. In fact, I have cooldown everywhere because I don't have J talent that has extra cooldown. I don't have the extra attack speed. You can definitely get rid of at least 1 or 2 cooldown rolls when you have this weapon, because it has cooldown and more attack speed. But on the fire setup with Bartok, you have to go cooldown essentially almost everywhere besides 1 ring. So here you have the area damage, but there's cooldown on the unity. there's cooldown, and here's cooldown. And with this, it is quite comfortable. You can also add the last cooldown roll if you have a lot of issues. I have tried a bit and I get around without this cooldown roll quite well. I have a total of 59.81 with the Enchantress. I tried pretty hard to replace those Stone Gauntlets, which is almost impossible, so I wanted to get quad factor here with area damage instead of dexterity, but this was ridiculously hard and yeah, basically impossible. So I tried like 1,000 bounty mats on this after I had already this pair here, but no success. Found these shoulders here, they're pretty good. I would prefer resource cost reduction, I guess, because it would make it a bit easier. If you play lightning, you definitely want resource cost reduction here, but for fire it's totally fine and gives me a bit more defense. Soakin's Gaze, this is the item I gambled for the most, which is why I have all these blind waves in primal, but I got this 4.5 crit, is alright. I also tried some reforge on this in the end, but nothing. Cinder nothing super special, it's very easy to get a Cinder Coat. I actually found 2 primals. I used this one here, which is very nice. We have Reaching Hour, also nothing special, I guess. You find those like whenever. Black Thorns, also not super hard. I tried reforging a bit to try to get Auras and with 20 fire, but no success. But this is totally fine with armor here. And the Cruder's Boots. This is actually the first of all this gear that I gambled. So this was after I started the season, and I was like 4 days in with basically no gear whatsoever for my LOD monk, and then eventually I got those boots and they're absolutely insane. So that was, I don't know if it's called lucky, but considering that I had like some 180% non-ancient boots before that, that was definitely quite an upgrade. And finally this Kiroshiro blade. I had another one that was pretty good, but I had a really bad affix, which has only 206%. I think I deleted it already. But otherwise pretty similar stats, but with dexterity I think instead of the damage percent. So I spent some of my last few bounty mats after I had spent like over 2,000 and had like 200, 500 left or something like this on the Kiroshiro blade, and I got this one, and this is an absolute insane weapon in the end. So 9% damage at my Paragon, you can definitely roll off the dex, and then the area and the cooldown. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, so overall my gear is extremely good. It can be improved a little bit. For example, 2% more damage reduction here and auras here, so that it would give me some more toughness, which I don't really need. I do have a defensive passive, the Guardian's Path, but I think I couldn't really get around of using it, and there's also not really much to take in terms of DPS. There would be momentum, it's like another offensive choice, but apart from this I have Unity on my weapon, I have Determination already, so there's not really that much to take. I could get another 2% on the affix here, which is like a not even 1% damage upgrade. The big one here would be the skirts. So after I got this primal skirts, I actually tried even more reforging on the skirts, and I got 2 other primal skirts, but they were 2 times of air damage and 1 time of average damage. So no elemental crit, but that would definitely be the biggest upgrade. Even with all the elemental damage that they have on Cinder Coat and Black Thorns, an extra fire roll would be something like a 12% DPS increase, which definitely beats the 20% area and also makes a faster boss kill. So that would be quite nice, but obviously this would need like perfect rolls to be competitive. Even if I get something like 8% crit chance and maybe 95% crit damage, I would actually, think about which one to choose. So overall, quite happy with it, but yeah, this is probably the weakest piece after all. Here, this is the 1.5 crit, otherwise perfect. And of course the quad factor would be really good here for another 20 area. But apart from this, the gear is actually really good. I calculate that this all kind of adds up to maybe 1 tier or so in Greater Rift levels, in levels of scuffedness for my gear. So not too bad, and it will work, I think. Lastly, quickly showing my skill setup. So nothing really special here. I use Serenity, I really like that a lot. You can get away without it if you are quite tanky, but I like to have it because it also sometimes gives me a way out when my Epiphany drops. But on the other hand, when you don't have Serenity, you can also keep up Epiphany more easily because the Zodiac procs are not consumed by the skill, and maybe you can replace it with a mantra. Apart from this, I have Cyclone Strike, Eye of the Storm. This is like a notable change that I've done. This used to be Implosion for the bigger radius, but it costs 50 spirit, and I went with the 26 spirit. And that actually allows me to just spam this a lot more And I don't really suffer from this smaller radius because most of the time I have a lot of enemies around me anyway. And like this I can just spam it for Zodiac procs whenever I want without slowing enemies from attacking with Web of Light. So when I try to make a pull, I Cyclone Strike all the time and reset my cooldowns and also pull stuff together quite easily. On Dashing Strike I have experimented with Radiance for 50% increased attack speed, but it is a kind of minor offensive bonus for a really huge defensive loss. 40% dodge chance is essentially 40% damage reduction against most attacks at least, and I definitely kept this here in the end. Although I would really like to increase attack speed, which would make everything much more smooth, much more easy, but it's too much of a loss for me to take. Here my Paragons, I have full dexterity, I have the maximum spirit because that makes it easier to use the Mystic Allies on time, because if you don't have this and you press the Mystic Ally button, you have to be almost exactly at 0 to actually not overcap your spirit, because you get 200 when you activate it. So this was easy investment for me, movement speed of course, and then the dexterity. I do have 2 vitality augments because I'm going to use these items on cross-class builds probably. So I get some of my vitality from there. So I have 609,000 life, and I would definitely not recommend less than this. So 600, 700k definitely should be there, especially when you're a bit lower Paragon and stuff. You might be a bit too squishy, so you can even go with like 800k or something like this. But more than that, I probably wouldn't invest and rather try to get better damage reduction, more on-res, and just play around with Serenity a bit better. I do rely on recovery a lot, so I have this life parade roll here on the bracers for example. You already get it from your ethereal because all monk ethereals have it, but I added some extra, and you do attack quite fast, so like 2.5 times a second or something when you have seized the initiative, and like this you can definitely recover around 100k or so just from your life per hit, which is quite important. So when you have a too high life pool, you will just not heal fast enough. Lastly, my follower, I have the Enchantress, which doesn't have any skill in the first row because this is CC that I don't want. And then we have all the 3 right skills, so the cooldown, erosion, and the G-Def. The items are nothing special: Nemesis, Flavor, Unity. Orcus, not really necessary, but it does proc here and there. So it could be replaced with something else, like a Credit Flame or a Lightning version for example, because it just doesn't really appear too often. And even if it does, you might not be able to use it. So this is it for my character. This is what I use for 150 pushing. It is a quite heavy push, I can say, so I'm expecting to use at least 2000 keys, but it might be more. And so far I did have some pretty good attempts, but usually they ended with some missing follow-up pylon or missing follow-up level or something like this after I went to like 80% and just didn't have time or didn't have an opportunity to spawn a boss. So it is quite fishy, it is very hard to do at this level, but it is possible, and I'll keep going until I get it. So stay tuned for my clear. Hope that you liked my little overview here, hope you liked this video, and maybe I'll also see you on my perch. So see you guys next time.